My name is Nicole Leach. A little bit about a background about me is I came from teaching Spanish and English, so I thought, oh, E&L would be a perfect segue between the two. And then I found out most of my students didn't speak Spanish that were my ELs. They were actually Punjabis, so I had to learn quickly how to help them and what to do, not being able to speak their language. Okay, so what we're going to start off with is I kind of want you guys to experience what it is like to be an English learner. So with someone sitting next to you, I want you to turn and share kind of what EL populations you've had experience with and what were some strengths and weaknesses, but you guys cannot use the B sound when you speak. So it makes you kind of think what it's like to have to think about what it is you're saying all the time, because that's what an English language learner has to do. So go ahead with someone next to you. So our objectives today are to identify Indiana's EL population. We just talked about our own specific populations. Besides Spanish speakers, because I heard a lot of people talking about Spanish speakers, but what do you think is the next language that's spoken after Spanish that we have the most of here in Indiana for our ELs? You have guesses? No guesses? What was it?
Was it Chin? Like the Chin population?
Good, yep. And then we're going to identify laws that have led to EL services, identify changes that have occurred because of ESSA. We're going to differentiate between NESP and Title III, define components of WIDA and identify the uses, create a timeline of enrollment, and create steps to completing an EL plan. So we are going to help you if you have to come and learn, even if you're not EL. So we already talked about what our experiences and where we're at, so let's go ahead and go on. An EL student is basically someone who's aged 3 through 21, and I'm just going to go with the blue. Someone whose native language is a language other than English. It doesn't mean they have to be born in another country. I had a lot of ELs that were actually born here, but when they grow up at home and speaking Spanish, for example, or any other language, a lot of times they are an EL, and that has difficulties in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding. So that is an EL student. We have 50,682 English learners, 275 languages. So you guys were primarily Spanish speaking in here, right? What other languages? Were there any others that are at your schools? So Chin is the Burmese refugees. Mm-hmm. We have quite a bit. The biggest populations are Perry has a lot, and what other? Fort Wayne?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Fort Wayne has a lot of Burmese.
Okay. So obviously Spanish is the most. Then we have Chin, then Arabic, German, and Mandarin. And we have the most of level 3s. Does anybody know why level 3 can kind of trip people up sometimes? Everybody know a lot about the levels yet? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have basically kind of our social language and we have our academic language. So social language is pretty much developed by a level 3. But the academic language is not quite there yet. That comes along with a 4 and when they become fluent. So a lot of times they'll come into the teacher's classroom, the teacher thinks they know English, they're talking to their friends all the time, I don't have to do that much for them, but the academic language is still missing. So that's where we still have to service them and make sure that we're doing what they need to meet their needs. And that is what 41.6% of our ELs are at that part. And then the next breaks down in just basically where they're at. Their averages with listening, reading, speaking, writing, and their overall from last year. Overall was 3.2 last year on our Access. Has anybody ever been involved with Access or WIDA so far? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4, 5. And then we'll go over some things with that. So I like to make you guys work because I don't like to sit up and talk all the time. Plus, I'm getting my first cold of the year, if you can't hear. So what we're going to do, we now have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Probably every pair is going to come up and get a piece of chart paper. And I have the smelly markers, so if you have a preference on which smell you like, they're up here. And you're each going to get a task, and you're going to go to this blend space that I created that has a lot of EL resources for you. And the task will tell you what you need to do to find the answer or to write it on the chart paper. And then we're going to put them maybe more up here so that we can actually see it on the camera instead of back there. So come on up, whoever would like to. Yes, pairs. And it is sticky chart paper on the top, so. Any preference on colors?
And take one of these?
Yes, and then this one right here. You get the law. Oh, thank you, thank you. Okay. And you get to learn about funding. Okay. Making an EL plan. WIDA screener. And then you get identification. Is everybody able to access this website fairly easy? And just here, I'll hold it for you.
Thank you.
That's okay. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So ours was the identification or the initial trying to figure out if a student is an English learner or not, the identification process. So you start with an initial home language survey, abbreviated HLS, and the student is only given this one time throughout their time at your school. Once you decide to give that home language survey, next comes giving the WIDA, or there's a kindergarten screener, I forget what it's
Yep, the
called.
WIAPT.
Okay. And then if a student scores an overall or below a 5 on the WIDA, if they don't score proficient, then they are identified as an English learner. You create an ILP, maintain documentations, and then when it comes to assessments, the state assessments, accommodations that you would have talked about and provided in your ILP.
Yep, so basically we give the home language survey first, and then if there's language besides English written on there, that's when we test them, like you said, with either the WIDA screener or the WIAPT. And then if they do not score proficient, we create the ILP and contact home. And thank you. Got it. Who wants to go next? Good job. You'll go? Okay, come on up. I love to have volunteers. And funding.
So we had funding Title III versus NESP. Both can be used for language instruction. Both can be used for professional development. Academic achievement, we didn't know. So in the NESP information, it doesn't clearly say. So does anybody know?
Be used to support academic achievement? Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't specifically say that, but okay. Community programs, they just called it family engagement. I think those are pretty similar. There might be some stipulations, but materials, it can be used for materials, technology, admin expenses only for Title III, and it's only 2%, and it cannot be used for NESP funds. So this is help support our yellow kids.
Yes, our Title III is more of the supplemental, and then NASP is where we do a lot of the main. Okay. Anything you guys want to add to that, just to make sure? No? Good? Okay. Okay. Thank you guys. You did a good job. So, ESSA requires a long-term goal. Each state to set an ambitious long-term goals for academic achievement, graduation rate, and English language proficiency. So the state long-term goal for our English language proficiency is 63% of Indiana's English learners will attain English language proficiency within 6 years. ESSA requires states to incorporate an indicator for English language proficiency in the state accountability model, and this indicator is weighted at 10% of the school grade. The Indiana English Language Proficiency Indicator measures growth toward proficiency for ELs in grades 1 through 12 as demonstrated by WIDA Access. Each student will have a growth target based on a student growth percentile that considers the student's grade level, age, and initial proficiency level. So this is going to be based off their first WIDA Access assessment. And then students who meet their projected growth target and or attain proficiency will count towards the school's English language proficiency score. Okay? And we will give you guys time for questions on all of this. So in response to consultation and coordination with the Accountability ESSA work group and the State Board of Ed, Indiana will require a minimum number of 20 students for all accountability indicator determinations. For schools who do not meet the minimum end size for any indicator, the weighting of the other applicable indicators is adjusted accordingly. And for all students in subgroup reporting purposes, Indiana will require a minimum number of 10. So here, Indiana requires states to uniformly apply statewide flexibility for recently arrived English learners on the state English Language Arts Assessment by choosing one of two options. For Indiana, we chose the second option. So for year 1, it's participation only. I mean, it's our first year. For year 2, we're looking at participation, but we're also looking at have they grown within the year. And then year 3, that's when we're going to include participation, growth, and their performance will be included in that. So that basically says that we chose option number 2, and that all English learners, including those who have been in U.S. schools for less than 1 academic year, will participate in English Language Arts ISTEP or whatever for their grade level. And we always found that it's nice for them to be able to, have the practice with the test and see the test. So that's why we would always go for giving it to them the first year. Okay, and then some updates for assessments. The IDOE, Office of Student Assessments, is the primary point of contact for the WIDA assessment. And if you look on the WIDA screener, on the resources I gave you, Graham Collins' name is on there, and he's our point person for that. Beginning this school year, the WIDA screener is online, and you still do the WIAP for kindergarten. And the 17-18 Indiana WIDA access testing, so this is our annual testing. The window is going to be January 8th through February 23rd. Okay, so here are some resources for you. On the resource I gave you the DOE's toolkit, and then here's the U.S. Department of Ed toolkit, and you can get WIDA updates here. So with all that information, that was just a lot thrown at you one time, what are your questions? Okay. And then my contact information is at the end if anybody needs it.